High-level government corruption keeps millions of Africans in poverty, while the ill-gotten proceeds are often redirected overseas. Yet even as the rich West condemns these practices, it also helps make them possible. Dirty money is channeled to banks in Europe and the US through anonymous companies that conceal the identities of those involved. So who helps facilitate this murky international trade? We asked 2 African journalists to find out.
It's easy for the developed world to look down on Africa, with the poverty and the corruption. And it's right, corruption does make us poor. But without the developed world, the big corruption couldn't happen. These rich countries promise Africa $50 billion every year in foreign aid. Yet my continent loses an estimated $148 billion every year to corruption. And it's these same rich countries that supply the getaway vehicle. Most of the stolen money ends up in bank accounts in some of the richest countries in the world. My name is Stanley Kwenda. I'm a journalist here in Zimbabwe, and I want to find out why the developed world makes it so easy for corrupt African leaders to steal from their own people. I'm on my way to the east of the country, where 6 years ago, huge reserves of diamonds were discovered. These diamonds gave the people of Zimbabwe a brief glimmer of hope, but from the very beginning, it's been the same old story. Allegations of corruption have dominated talk about the diamond sector.
Behind me are the Marange diamond fields. Every one of us here hopes to benefit from the diamond mining that is happening just down there. We hope they were going to transform our lives. But with allegations of corruption flying around, that hope seems to be fading so fast.
Marvin Mudiwa lives near the mines and is a community leader. The surrounding region is one of the most impoverished in the country, desperate for the development that the profits from the diamonds could bring. But he, like everyone else in the area, has become depressed by the ongoing reports of corruption.
So when this diamond came, it came as a God-given gift. We thought now, here we are going to benefit from jobs, infrastructure. We thought maybe our roads were going to improve so that generations and generations will benefit from this. Not one individual. But what is happening, honestly, it's a shame.
But it is not only locals who believe that corruption is dogging the industry. Since the formation of the coalition governments at the last election in 2008, control of the government ministries was divided between President Robert Mugabe's ZANU-PF party and the former opposition party, the Movement for Democratic Change. While Mugabe made sure that he continued to control the mines, he was forced to relinquish control of the Ministry of Finance. Now, tensions between the two ministries are reaching boiling point.
And according to the Zimbabwean Ministry of Mines, at the current production level capacity, these fields have got the ability to generate $2 billion every year for the country's struggling economy. But the Minister of Finance, Tendai Biti, says much of the money coming out of these fields is finding its way into the pockets of individuals.
No longer with direct access to the country's treasury, local and international NGOs fear that Mugabe is using the diamond money to maintain his grip on power. Back in Harare, I asked the minister what evidence he had to prove the money was being stolen.
Well, the only evidence I have is that we're not getting the money. We have got evidence of the quantities that are being mined, the quantities that are being exported, but nothing is coming to the fiscus.
I asked the minister where he thought the money was going.
I don't know where it's going. All I know is that it's not coming to treasury. So that's a self-evident question. It's not coming to us. That means someone is getting it. And that person who is not getting it is not getting it legal. Therefore, he's a thief. Therefore, she's a thief.
Unfortunately, this kind of situation is nothing new. All across Africa, we've seen high-level corruption robbing the continent of its wealth.
Here in Nigeria, former President Sani Abacha stashed $500 million in Swiss bank accounts. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, former President Mobutu Sese Seko had a fortune of between $1 billion and $5 billion. And here in Kenya, Former President Arap Moi is believed to have channeled money from government coffers into bank accounts belonging to his family members. The list goes on and on. Corruption in Africa is rightly condemned by observers in the West. But where does most of this corrupt money end up? It ends up in the West.
And how does the money get there? Last year, a major report by the World Bank into global corruption found that in almost every case they studied, the corrupt individuals were forming shell companies to disguise the movement of stolen money as legitimate business transactions. One reason why this has become such a big problem is because many company formation agents, otherwise known as corporate service providers, base themselves in offshore financial centers where secrecy laws allow people to form companies but keep their own identities hidden. These people can then open bank accounts using the company's name, meaning their own names don't appear in either the transaction or on the company records. This makes it very difficult for investigators to see when these companies are being used for corruption. Amazingly, all this is perfectly legal, but what we will show is that many of these corporate service providers are also failing to comply with local and international anti-money laundering rules, making it even easier for corrupt officials to steal money. I asked the Minister of Finance if he had considered investigating the involvement of these offshore secrecy jurisdictions in the diamond corruption he alleges.
We are not a sophisticated government, so to then trace offshore accounts and simulated shelf companies, that's beyond us. That's beyond us.
It may be beyond my government to follow hidden money trails to offshore tax havens, but that doesn't stop us from doing our own investigation. To show just how easy it has become to rob my continent, I've come to the Seychelles, one of Africa's up-and-coming offshore financial centers. Despite its reputation as a classic tax haven, the Seychelles government has been very active in improving its anti-money laundering regulations. But as we will show, even that doesn't make it difficult to abuse the system. This is the plan. I'll be posing as George Kwenda, a corrupt official from Zimbabwe who is looking to form an anonymous shell company to help launder millions of dollars of his dirty money. I've recruited my colleague, the Ghanaian journalist Anas Armeo Anas, who will be posing as Prince Asamoah, my lawyer. As an undercover specialist, Anas never reveals his face to the media. He has already been here for one day, making inquiries with different corporate service providers and setting the scene for my arrival. He has told them that he has a rich client from Zimbabwe who wants to form an offshore company, and that this client made his money brokering deals between the Zimbabwean government and various diamond mining companies. These details in themselves should raise serious suspicions. But on top of that, Anas has told them that his client wants to remain anonymous and doesn't want to submit any ID documentation when opening the company. This would be illegal. Secrecy laws here allow company ownership information to be kept hidden, but it must still be recorded in case of a criminal investigation. Let's see how Anas got on in the meetings.
So tell me, how has it been going so far?
Well, it's been quite interesting since I came. Well, the first thing I asked them was whether they could open a company for you without any ID. And they all said no. Then I proceeded to ask them whether they could open up a company for you, but using my ID on your behalf. And that is why it got very interesting. Some of the companies said yes, they could do that.
Back at our accommodation, Anas showed me local laws to explain exactly why this is illegal. They state that corporate service providers must not knowingly conceal the real owners of the companies they create, which is exactly what they are doing by accepting Anas's documentation, even though they know I will be the one actually controlling the company, what is known as the beneficial owner.
But in this case, they are willing to actually use my documentation to open your company when they know definitely that that is not permitted by the law.
If I really was a corrupt African official, this is all very good news so far. In less than a day, ANASI has found a number of corporate service providers that have expressed a willingness to turn a blind eye to the law. And this is all despite our best efforts to flag up the dubious nature of my character. The next step is for me to meet these corporate service providers face to face and to make absolutely sure that my name will not be identified anywhere in the paperwork. I want to make sure that my tracks are well and truly covered. It's time for ANAS to give me some training on how to use the secret cameras.
Listen to the instructions carefully. The kind of shots we need must be very steady. Fixing it, always the camera must look straight, must face down. You have to wait that as we enter the place, we cannot determine which position they are going to set originally. So I'm going to pretend that we are now in the office. Okay, you are welcome, Mr. George. I believe that we would have filmed something. Let's take a laptop and check what we have filmed. The only thing you didn't do is just to focus on me. Okay. You understand? You've done well. You've done very well. So I think we should be ready to go now.
Yeah. So I think we are ready now to go out for the secret filming. I've done this sort of thing before, but it's amazing just how the adrenaline gets over you as you prepare for these kinds of missions. But we are now ready for action, and the car is waiting for us outside, and I'm going out now.
We've arranged a meeting at Zen Offshore Limited, one of many corporate service providers here. On arrival, we were met by Stephen Anglin, the client services manager, and Yuri Sfiko, the man ANAS met in his first meeting. ANAS repeated his intention to open the company on my behalf, so that I would have no documented connection to the company whatsoever, something which would be against the law.
That's okay.
That's okay.
You are the beneficial owner, and we don't even ask you about your name or address or everything.
Yeah, and that sometimes is a very good way. It gives an extra level so that they can't find anything about who the actual owner of the company is.
You can appreciate why I'm saying this, because my client is from Zimbabwe.
I can too.
And then he's the liaison officer between the Zimbabwean government and the rich diamond mines.
Yeah, we don't want to know that.
But don't go.
I mean, that's the sorts of things that we can't have knowledge. If we have knowledge of that, we have to put it forward. So I haven't heard a word you've said in the last couple of minutes.
Okay.
I was shocked to see how open they were to flouting the law. They clearly understood that they were dealing with a potentially corrupt individual, but they simply didn't care. Stephen went on to describe how we could make it almost impossible for investigators to find out even ANAS's connection to the company by opening a chain of companies in different offshore jurisdictions.
You can put a company inside a company inside a company if you wanted to.
You buy this company, Current International Consulting. You may register another company in Dominica, say.
You put the
Or buy
shareholder
this company
of this company as the Dominican company. Then you buy a Bailey's company, you put the shareholder of the Dominican company as the Bailey's company. So you can actually fit a structure so that it takes them, first they've got to go to Dominican, then they've got to go to Bailey's, then they've got to come to Seychelles, then, and it's just impossible. No one is going to try and chase that sort of information.
Yeah. So
We can have layers of about 10.
You can have layers of any amount. Any amount that you want, you can layer. It just depends on what you want to do, and this is something that the head office company does a lot of. They do really complex structures. Now, I don't know if you want to go into that depth, but there's certainly a possibility and plenty of range to do that sort of thing.
This kind of layering is one of the key tactics used by people who want to launder stolen money. And I couldn't believe these agents were happy to discuss it like this. But what they were saying also made me feel like the whole offshore financial system is basically designed to help people evade the law. And it's not just corrupt African politicians abusing this system. It's tax dodgers, drug runners, terrorists, and all kinds of criminals that want to keep their identities hidden. What I can't understand is why the West, with all its power, is allowing such a distorted system to exist. So it looks like I'll have no problem laundering my millions of dollars with the help of this corporate service provider. After buying the company, all we will need to do is open a bank account, which Anas could do using the company's name. If any investigator came snooping, my name would be nowhere to be seen.
I am totally disgusted about this. For me, it tells you the scope of the fraud that is being perpetrated, that people can just run away, come and find people like this. And it's on the international scale, and nobody is doing anything about it. I find it very, very shocking.
The whole experience had left me feeling shell-shocked. It's depressing to think how easy these corrupt leaders have had it all these years. But we still had one more meeting to go. It would have been easy to suggest that Zen Offshore was just one raw company, but nothing could have prepared me for the conversation that was about to take place in the next meeting.
Hello, Mr. Charles. Yeah, I just spoke to him, and the time works for him.
Our meeting was with Charles Lucas, the director of another corporate service provider called Premier Offshore Limited. Once again, Anas explained my desire to have no recorded connection to the company that he would like to open on my behalf.
George, Prince, this can be done. We can register an offshore company. You can open your bank account. I can assist you with that. And George will not appear on it at all. But for this, you will have to be very careful to ensure that George is protected. Yeah. So he must never be known or seen.
Once again, we had found a corporate service provider that seems happy to break the law. But that was only the start. He then advised us on how we could create companies to disguise the transfer of corrupt money so that the transfers look like normal business transactions.
Assuming you have $1 million you want to deal with, it's not with your cash, okay? We may have to create another company, and that company will be a consultant company. It charges you monthly or weekly X amount on all sorts of transactions, and you organize for payment to be deposited into that company's account, okay? For payment of the fees and charges. And as such, finally, you get your money quietly. Or otherwise, you can create another company. You see this issue of having international business companies, offshore companies. Yes. You can make one to complement the other, depending on your needs and the use for it.
The meeting was quickly turning into a crash course in money laundering, and the central role played by companies was becoming very clear. To think that we had only been in Seychelles a couple of days, and we were finding it this easy to meet professionals who were willing to assist us in these criminal matters. It is no wonder that Africa loses an estimated $148 billion every year to corruption, almost 3 times the amount we receive in foreign aid.
I must admit, I am shocked by this guy. He sounded as this hardened criminal, and I can't believe he accepted me as this corrupt businessman. And only God knows how many more corrupt people he has assisted to launder money. And what really surprised me was just how easy he made it sound.
Anas and I decided we wanted to meet Charles Lucas one more time, and this time confront him with the truth on how we feel about what he is doing.
Hi, Mr. Charles, how are you?
The day after the meeting, Anas had gone to Charles' office to pay for a company. So we asked Charles if he could come to our apartment with the incorporation documents. We waited for him outside.
Okay, by now you should be on. Nice to meet you again.
Thank you.
Take a seat.
Thank you. Excuse me. There we are. I had limited how you told me yesterday.
could have...
No, sorry, very sorry. I intend to sign quickly and then...
Yes.
We will...
Okay. Excuse me, may I see where you signed? Yes. This is your certificate of incorporation.
Mr. Lucas, you are shameless. What do you have to say for yourself for this kind of work that you do? You are impoverishing my continent, helping corrupt people come here to hide stolen money. What do you have to say for yourself?
Mr. Lucas, listen, the activities of people like you, it is what is keeping the African continent badly.
You know, sir, what you are doing? You know what you are doing?
What are we doing? These activities have always kept Africans in poverty. You know what this means? This means to the African continent?
You know what you are doing now?
What are we doing?
What are we doing?
You don't know what I am also doing.
Yes, but we are saying...
What are you doing?
I will tell you one thing.
Mr. Lucas, no.
I will walk out.
No, don't walk out. Don't walk out. You have to know that such activities have never helped us.
What do you have to say for yourself,
in Africa,
Mr. Lucas?
do you know how we are suffering?
This kind of behavior...
Do you know how many people are dying in Africa?
And that was that. He walked away, and we never saw him again. Before leaving Seychelles, after everything we had seen here, I felt it was necessary to speak to some local law enforcement to get their perspective. I spoke to the director of the Seychelles Financial Intelligence Unit, Declan Barber. He was brought in by the government to help develop the country's defenses against financial crime.
Well, it doesn't entirely surprise me, Stanley, that there's a minority within the offshore industry here that would facilitate that type of approach and that type of activity. But this small number of people will bring, you know, they are at disproportionate risk to the reputation of a country that is doing its very best in the face of constant challenges from this minority in relation to you know, using the jurisdiction for, you know, criminally supportive activities. But you know, it's not as if, for example, Europe or the United States can hold up a clear white sheet on issues like this. There are malpractices everywhere. Like in the vast majority of cases where we would be tracking tainted assets, the financial flows, they don't end in Seychelles. Much of the time they move to respectable jurisdictions, if you wish. Hong Kong, to the UK, to the US. So this is a global issue. It's not a regional issue, and it's certainly not a Seychelles issue.
Here in the Seychelles, I've shown how easy it is to employ the corporate services sector to help hide corrupt money trails. But as Declan said, money laundering is a global issue, and these corporate services can also be found in major financial centers across the world, centers like London. In fact, recent studies have shown that corporate service providers operating in developed nations are the least compliant with international anti-money laundering standards that ask for customer identities to be properly verified. We actually put this to the test and sent emails to a number of corporate service providers in the UK and the US. And we found that a good number of them were willing to form companies without asking for any ID documents. In fact, in most states in the US, there's no legal requirement whatsoever for corporate service providers to collect this information. But countries like the UK and America are also claiming to lead the fight against money laundering. So surely, it shouldn't be so easy to create anonymous entities that make that criminality easy. In most parts of Africa, it's hard to avoid corruption, and we are sick of it. Our money, the money we need to invest in all our futures, is being stolen and hidden overseas. What we need is corporate and financial transparency. Instead, we have corporate service providers that are happy to do business with absolutely anyone and everyone, weakly enforced regulations, and an international system that tolerates the use and abuse of secrecy to our cost.
And we'll return to this story in the months ahead as we investigate just how corrupt money is moved around banks in the developed world.